In the busy city of Kalunga, Amina's heart raced as she held the invitation to her fiancé Jabari's family dinner. For days she had prayed for this moment, believing it would be her chance to finally prove herself to the people who had always looked at her like an outsider. She chose her outfit carefully, a flowing Ankara dress in warm colors that carried both simplicity and elegance. She wanted to look beautiful without seeming like she was trying too hard. As she adjusted her earrings in the mirror, she whispered to herself, "This is my night. They will see who I truly am." The streets glowed with lights as she rode to the grand family mansion. Her palms felt damp, and her mind replayed all the advice her mother had given her. Smile, be respectful. Don't let their wealth make you feel small. But inside, Amina carried a quiet fear. What if they never saw past her humble beginnings? Still, she forced a smile. She loved Jabari and she wanted his family to love her too. With hope in her chest and trembling hands, she stepped out of the car, ready to walk into a night that would change her life forever. Would you like me to now expand scene 2? The table of judgment in the same detailed emotional style, around 200 to 250 words? The mansion stood like a palace, its marble floors shining under golden lights, and every corner whispered wealth. Amina tried not to stare, but it was impossible not to notice the chandeliers that sparkled like stars or the paintings that seemed to breathe with history. The long dining table stretched across the grand hall, covered with plates of food so rich and endless it almost looked like a feast for royalty. She took a quiet breath, reminding herself to stay calm, but the moment she sat down, she felt the weight of every eye on her. The relatives didn't hide their curiosity. Their gazes moved over her dress, her hands, even the way she held her fork. It was as if they weren't just seeing her. They were searching her, hoping to catch her in some mistake, some proof that she didn't belong. Amina straightened her back and smiled politely, but inside, her heart thumped like a drum. The air was heavy, thick with unspoken judgment. Conversations flowed across the table, but every laugh and whisper felt like it carried her name. One of Jabari's cousins leaned closer to another, whispering behind a forced smile, their eyes darting toward Amina. She could feel it, even when she didn't hear the words. The clinking of glasses, the scraping of silverware, the echo of laughter, all of it built a wall around her, making her feel small in a room where she had hoped to feel welcome. She tried to remind herself of her worth, that she was more than her background, more than their assumptions. But the coldness in their stares pressed harder against her chest with each passing moment. Sitting there, surrounded by wealth yet starved of warmth, Amina realized this dinner was not a welcome. It was a test. And though she didn't know it yet, the answers they were waiting for would break the night wide open. Do you want me to continue with scene 3? The whispered laughter and the same emotional and the soft hum of conversation filled the dining room, but Amina could hear the whispers that weren't meant for her. Two of Jabari's cousins leaned close together, pretending to joke about the wine, but their words slipped through the air sharp and clear. "She's only here because he has money," one sneered, loud enough for others to hear. The other cousin chuckled, covering his mouth as though it were a private joke, but the sound carried, and soon a few more around the table began to laugh. Amina's hand froze around her glass. The laughter wasn't light-hearted. It was cruel, heavy, and deliberate. Every chuckle hit her chest like a stone. She kept her face calm, her lips curled into a polite smile, but inside, she felt the sting spreading deep into her heart. Her throat burned with the words she wanted to say, but she swallowed them down. She had promised herself she would not lose control, no matter how much they tried to break her spirit. The whispers grew bolder, feeding off each other like fire catching dry wood. "Look at her dress, so simple. You can tell she's not used to this life," another voice said, followed by a wave of hushed giggles. Amina shifted slightly in her chair, her back straightening even more, her hands steadying on the table. They wanted her to flinch, to show weakness, but she refused to give them that satisfaction. Her eyes lifted toward Jabari, hoping he would step in, defend her, remind his family that she deserved respect. But he only smirked, as if enjoying the performance. That hurt more than the whispers. Still, Amina sat tall, her silence more powerful than their laughter. She told herself quietly, "Endure it. This moment will not define you. Your worth is not theirs to decide." And while the laughter echoed around her like daggers, Amina's spirit began to sharpen, slowly preparing for a response none of them could have imagined. "Would you like me to now expand scene 4? The fiancé's cruel words in the same style, around 350 words? The chatter around the table grew louder, laughter spilling over like a cruel wave. Amina sat silently, her eyes lowered, trying to hold her dignity together piece by piece. But then through the noise came the voice she trusted the most, the one voice she thought would protect her. Jabari leaned back in his chair, a smirk tugging at his lips, and in a tone that carried across the table he said, "Let's not pretend, we all know she's just a gold digger." The words hit her harder than any whisper, harder than all the mocking laughter that had filled the room before. It was as though the ground beneath her shifted. Her heart stopped for a moment, her breath caught in her chest. She turned to him, her eyes wide with disbelief, searching his face for some sign that he was joking, that he didn't mean it. But there was no kindness in his eyes, only pride in the way his words had made the others laugh louder. The room roared with cruel amusement, glasses clinking as though someone had told the funniest joke of the night. But for Amina the sound was unbearable. It rang in her ears like shattering glass. She wanted to stand to defend herself, to scream that she was not what they called her. Yet her voice felt locked inside her throat. Her body stiffened, her hands trembling under the table where no one could see. She thought of the night she had stayed awake helping Jabari through struggles he had hidden from his family, the sacrifices she had made for their future, the love she had given without ever asking for anything in return. And now here he was, the man she thought she would spend her life with, tearing her apart in front of everyone. For the first time Amina realized something deeper than pain. It wasn't just humiliation. It was betrayal. And betrayal she knew would leave a wound that no apology could ever heal. "Do you want me to move on to scene 5? The room erupts 350 words, in the same emotional and viral tone. The moment Jabari's cruel words left his lips, the table exploded with laughter. It wasn't the soft kind that fades quickly. It was loud, sharp, and endless, bouncing off the high walls of the mansion. Uncles slapped the table as if they had just heard the joke of the year. Aunts covered their mouths, pretending to be modest but unable to hide their delight. Cousins leaned into one another, whispering more insults in between their laughter. Glasses clinked, cutlery scraped, and for a moment, Amina's dignity became the center of their entertainment. Her chest tightened as though someone had wrapped chains around her ribs. Every second of their laughter pulled her deeper into a place she never imagined she'd be. A place where love had betrayed her, and strangers felt entitled to break her apart. She sat frozen, her smile gone, her face pale with shock. But while her body trembled inside, her eyes began to change. Behind the sheen of tears, there was a flicker of something stronger, something brighter. Amina inhaled slowly, her fingers gripping the edge of her chair. She realized that they wanted her to break, to cry, to give them more reasons to believe their words. But she would not give them that satisfaction. Her silence became her shield. Her stillness became her strength. She looked around the table, meeting their eyes one by one, and though they were laughing, her gaze unsettled them. There was no anger in her eyes, no pleading, just a calmness that felt too powerful for the moment. Inside, Amina told herself, if they want to laugh, let them laugh. This night will not end the way they expect. She felt a quiet fire building in her chest, and though no one else noticed, her strength was already rewriting the story. Would you like me to now expand scene 6? The unexpected guest, 350 words, in the same viral and emotional style? At the far end of the long glittering table, away from the noise and cruel laughter, sat an elderly man. His presence was quiet but commanding, the kind that needed no words to demand respect. This was Mr. Adewale, the CEO of the very company where Jabari worked. His silver hair reflected under the chandelier, and his sharp, watchful eyes seemed to cut through the room. While everyone else drowned themselves in mockery and arrogance, he sat still, his gaze fixed on Amina. No one noticed him, or rather no one thought he mattered in that moment. They were too busy laughing, too busy tearing down the young woman they believed didn't belong among them. But Mr. Adewale was listening closely. Every insult, every whisper, every cruel laugh reached him as clearly as if it had been spoken into his ear. And while the others saw only a woman they thought unworthy, he saw something entirely different. The way Amina's back remained straight, the way her eyes refused to dim, the way her silence carried more weight than their noise. Amina could feel his eyes on her, though she didn't dare look directly. Something about his stillness gave her strength, like a quiet reminder that someone, at least one person, understood. She had no idea who he was or why he was studying her so carefully, but in that sea of humiliation, his steady presence felt like an anchor. Jabari, too proud and too distracted by the attention his cruel joke had won him, didn't even realize the importance of the man sitting just a few seats away. If he had looked, if he had noticed, perhaps he would have swallowed his words. But Jabari was blind to it, blind to the fact that the very man who held his future in his hands was silently measuring him, and measuring her. In that moment, while laughter echoed and dignity cracked like glass, the real shift of power had already begun. And none of them, not even Amina, knew how much this quiet observer would change everything before the night was over. "Do you want?" The laughter was finally starting to fade when the waiter appeared, holding a small black folder in his hands. The dining room grew quiet for a moment as the bill was placed neatly at the center of the long table. It was not just a piece of paper. It was the final reminder of the wealth and power that surrounded the room. Everyone's eyes flicked toward it, waiting to see who would claim the honor of paying. Jabari leaned back in his chair, his arrogance dripping with every movement. With a smirk, he slid the folder across the polished table toward his father. "Let the rich ones handle it," he said loudly, earning a few chuckles from his cousins. His words carried the same dismissive tone that had bruised Amina all night, as if to remind her once more of where she supposedly stood. But before anyone else could move, Amina's hand reached forward. Calm, steady, and without hesitation, she picked up the folder. The table froze. Forks stopped halfway to mouths, whispers cut short, and all eyes turned to her. Slowly, gracefully, she opened the folder, glanced at the number that would have made most of them pause, and without a word slipped her card inside. For a moment, silence pressed against the walls of the mansion. Even Jabari stared at her, his smirk faltering as confusion flickered in his eyes. No one had expected it. The woman they had called a gold digger, the one they had mocked for her background, had just taken control in a way none of them could have imagined. Amina didn't boast, didn't look around for approval. She simply handed the folder back to the waiter with quiet dignity, her movements smooth and certain. It wasn't about the money. It was about showing them that their laughter and their insults could not define her. And in that silence, as the waiter walked away with her card, the balance of the night shifted. Amina had spoken louder with her action than anyone at that table had with their cruel words. "Would you like me to continue with scene 8? The waiter returned a few minutes later, holding the black folder with both hands. The room had grown tense, the earlier laughter now reduced to small murmurs. When he placed the folder in front of Amina, everyone leaned forward ever so slightly, curious, waiting to see if it was a mistake. Surely they thought she hadn't actually done it. But Amina opened it calmly, removed her card, and placed it back into her small purse. She didn't smile. She didn't explain. She simply nodded politely at the waiter, as though what she had just done was the most ordinary thing in the world. Yet everyone at the table knew it wasn't ordinary. That bill was not something anyone paid lightly. Even Jabari's wealthy relatives would have thought twice before taking it up on their own. The silence that followed was thick, pressing, almost uncomfortable. All the mocking voices from earlier had vanished. The cousins who had sneered now stared wide-eyed. Aunts who had giggled behind their napkins froze, their forks hanging in the air. Even Jabari's father shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his face turning pale with embarrassment. And Jabari, the man who had called her a gold digger, sat stunned, his smirk completely gone, replaced by disbelief. Amina didn't gloat. She didn't throw her wealth in their faces or demand respect. She sat tall, her expression calm, her dignity untouched. For the first time that night, she wasn't the one being watched with ridicule. She was being watched with shock, with confusion, and though none of them would admit it yet, with respect. The sound of laughter had died. The room that once roared with cruel amusement was now so quiet that the ticking of the golden clock on the wall could be heard. Amina had shifted the atmosphere completely, and she had done it without a single word. "Do you want me to move ahead with scene 9? The exit of dignity, 350 words. In the same emotional and viral style?" The room was still heavy with silence when Amina slowly rose from her chair. Every eye followed her, waiting for a scene, waiting for her to break down, to shout or cry. But she did none of that. Instead, she smoothed the fabric of her Ankara dress with calm, steady hands, her movements graceful and deliberate. She looked around the table once, her gaze sweeping over the faces that had mocked her, over Jabari whose smirk had now turned to shame, and then she spoke only 3 simple words. "Thank you for the dinner." Her voice was soft, but it carried through the entire hall, echoing louder than all the insults that had filled it before. There was no bitterness in her tone, no trembling, no anger, just dignity. And that dignity struck deeper than any outburst ever could. Without another word, Amina turned and began walking toward the door. Her heels clicked gently against the marble floor. Each step measured, steady, almost regal. The chandeliers above shimmered as if following her, casting a glow on her calm figure. She didn't look back, not even once. To look back would have been to acknowledge them, to give weight to their cruelty. Instead, she carried herself forward, as though she had always belonged to something far greater than this room. The family sat frozen, their forks untouched, their mouths closed in stunned silence. Even the air seemed to shift as she crossed the wide hall, her quiet strength leaving behind a mark none of them would ever forget. Jabari felt his chest tighten with something he couldn't name, regret perhaps, or fear. But by then it was too late. And when Amina reached the grand doors of the mansion, her head held high, it was clear to everyone watching. She hadn't lost anything that night. In fact, she had just walked away with more power than any of them could measure. "Do you want me to now write scene 10? The CEO follows 350 words, in the same emotional cinematic style? For a moment after Amina stepped out, the room remained frozen, as if no one dared move. Then, to everyone's shock, the sound of a chair sliding back echoed through the silence. At the far end of the table, Mr. Adiwale, the CEO, rose slowly to his feet. His presence alone commanded attention, but now his action left the entire family speechless. Without a word, he straightened his jacket and began walking toward the door Amina had just exited. Gasps rippled across the table. Aunts exchanged quick glances, cousins leaned into each other whispering, and Jabari's father stiffened in disbelief. "Why would he leave with her?" someone muttered under their breath. It was almost unthinkable. This was a man of immense power, a man whose time was worth more than the wealth that decorated their mansion. And yet, he was choosing to follow Amina, the woman they had mocked all evening. Jabari's smirk had long since vanished, but now his face turned pale. A knot formed in his throat as whispers grew louder around him. Some thought perhaps the CEO wanted to reprimand her for causing a scene. Others speculated he must know her in some hidden way. But none of them truly understood. Mr. Adiwale's steps were calm, steady, and purposeful. He did not glance at anyone, did not explain himself, and that silence carried a weight heavier than any speech. Every member of that family, for the first time that evening, felt small under his quiet authority. By the time the heavy doors of the mansion closed behind him, the dining hall no longer felt grand or powerful. It felt tense, suffocating, and full of questions none of them dared to answer out loud. And as the echoes of his footsteps faded, one truth began to gnaw at every heart around the table. The story of this night was no longer theirs to control. "Do you want me to now expand scene 11, the revelation outside 350 words, in the same emotional and viral style?" The cool night air kissed Amina's face as she stepped outside the mansion. She inhaled deeply, her chest finally free from the suffocating weight of that dining hall. She was ready to walk away quietly, to let the night become nothing more than a painful memory. But then she heard footsteps behind her, slow, deliberate, strong. She turned slightly, and to her surprise, it was Mr. Adiwale, the CEO. He approached her with a calm dignity, his sharp eyes now softened by something she hadn't seen all night: respect. "I know who you are," he said gently, his voice carrying the weight of certainty. Amina blinked, confused, unsure of what he meant. Before she could respond, he continued, "You're not a gold digger. You're the woman who helped my company recover from debt 2 years ago. I never forget loyalty." Her lips parted in shock. She hadn't expected anyone to recognize her outside the shadows of that family. She remembered those long months when she had worked tirelessly as a consultant, sacrificing sleep, pouring her effort into saving a company that wasn't even hers. It had been one of her proudest achievements, but she had kept it quiet, humble, never bragging about it. And yet, here was the man at the very top remembering. For the first time that night, tears welled in Amina's eyes, not from humiliation but from relief. Someone finally saw her for who she truly was. Not as a burden, not as a stranger, not as a gold digger, but as a woman of value, intelligence, and loyalty. Mr. Adiwale placed a hand lightly on her shoulder, his voice steady. Do not let their laughter define you. Tonight they revealed who they are. But you, my dear, revealed something far greater. In that quiet moment under the night sky, Amina realized she hadn't lost anything at all. She had only gained clarity, an unexpected recognition that would change her future forever. Do you want me to now expand scene 12? The family left stunned 350 words. In the same emotional and viral S. Back inside the grand dining hall, the atmosphere had changed completely. The laughter that once shook the walls was gone, replaced by uneasy silence. Whispers spread slowly, like cracks running through glass. Why would he follow her? Jabari's aunt asked in a low voice, her eyes darting nervously toward the door. No one had an answer. The image of the CEO rising from his chair and leaving with Amina played over and over in their minds, shaking the confidence they had worn so proudly just minutes before. Jabari sat frozen, his fork lying untouched on his plate. For the first time all night, the weight of his own words hit him. He replayed the moment he had called Amina a gold digger, remembering the way her eyes had widened, the way her face had gone still. At the time he thought it was a clever joke, a way to win approval from his family. But now the taste of victory had turned bitter in his mouth. His chest felt heavy, as though shame itself had taken a seat beside him. His cousins, who had been the loudest to mock, now sat with lowered gazes, suddenly quiet. The aunts who had giggled behind their napkins shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Even Jabari's father, a man of pride, tapped his fingers nervously on the table, aware of how much weight the CEO's opinion carried. Jabari's mind raced. What if Mr. Adewale respected her? What if he admired her? The thought clawed at him, each possibility cutting deeper than the last. Amina had been his fiancée, his partner, the woman who stood by him in his weakest moments, and he had humiliated her in front of everyone who mattered most. The room felt colder now, the chandeliers above seeming dimmer. For the first time the family realized that their laughter may have cost them more than they could afford. And as silence pressed in on them, Jabari understood a truth that made his stomach twist. He hadn't just embarrassed her. He had thrown away the greatest blessing of his life. Do you want me to now expand scene? Under the soft glow of the mansion lights outside, Amina stood still, her heart still racing from everything that had happened inside. She had expected the night to end with humiliation, but now she found herself face to face with a man whose words were shifting the very ground beneath her feet. Mr. Adewale looked at her with a steadiness that carried no judgment, only deep respect. If you're willing, he began, his voice calm yet powerful, I'd like you to join me, not just in my company, but as a partner in rebuilding something greater. His words hung in the air like a promise, heavy with meaning. They weren't spoken out of pity, nor as an attempt to rescue her. They came from recognition, from the quiet truth that he saw her worth more clearly than anyone at that table ever had. Amina's lips parted, but no words came out. She felt her throat tighten, her chest swell with emotions too big to name. Just an hour ago, she had been fighting back tears as strangers mocked her. Now the most powerful man in the room, the man her fiancé admired and feared, was offering her something far beyond what she ever expected. I watched how you carried yourself, Mr. Adewale continued gently. You didn't fight for their approval. You didn't need to prove yourself with words. That strength is rare. That loyalty I once saw in your work is still there, unshaken. Tears filled Amina's eyes, but this time they came from pride, not pain. She nodded slowly, her voice soft but steady when she finally spoke. Thank you, sir. I've never needed their acceptance. I only wanted to be seen for who I am. And tonight, he said with a knowing smile, you were seen. In that moment, Amina realized that his offer was worth more than all the wealth and insults in that dining hall combined. It wasn't just an opportunity. It was proof that her dignity had carried her exactly where she was meant to be. Do you want me to now write scene 14? The regret of the foolish, 350 words, in the essay. Jabari sat in the grand dining hall, but the room that once felt like his stage now felt like a prison. The laughter he had enjoyed earlier echoed in his mind, no longer sweet but sharp, replaying like a curse he could not escape. He remembered the moment he called Amina a gold digger, the way his voice had carried across the table, the pride he had felt when the family erupted with laughter. At the time it felt like a victory. Now it felt like poison. He could still see her face in that moment, The shock in her eyes, the hurt she tried to hide, the silence she carried with such strength. And then he saw her again, standing tall, paying the bill without a single word, walking out of the mansion with dignity so unshakable it silenced them all. Worst of all, he saw the CEO rise and follow her, leaving him behind with nothing but his shame. The whispers in the room grew heavier. His aunts, his cousins, even his father looked at him differently now, no longer amused, no longer proud. Their judgment pressed on him like a weight he couldn't carry. He wanted to shout, to defend himself, to say he hadn't meant it, but the truth was he had. He had chosen cruelty over love, pride over loyalty, and now the consequences were standing before him, too real to ignore. Jabari's chest tightened as realization sank deeper. He hadn't just lost Amina. He had thrown away the woman who had been his greatest blessing. The CEO admired her now, the world would respect her tomorrow, and she would rise far beyond his reach. Meanwhile, he was left with nothing but regret, a man who had laughed too loudly, only to discover that he had mocked away his own future. And in that silence, as he lowered his eyes to the untouched food before him, Jabari knew he would never escape the memory of that night. Amina hadn't just walked out of the room, she had walked out of his life, and into a destiny brighter than he could ever give her. Would you like me to now expand scene 15, the woman who In the end, Amina's story did not remain inside the walls of that mansion. It spread, whispered first among the guests, then through the city of Kalunga, and soon beyond. People spoke of the young woman who had been mocked and humiliated, yet never once raised her voice in anger. They remembered how she stood tall, how she paid the bill without hesitation, and how the most powerful man in the room chose to walk out with her. Amina never tried to defend herself that night. She didn't shout, didn't argue, didn't throw their insults back at them. Instead, she let her actions speak. Her silence had been louder than their laughter, her dignity stronger than their cruelty. That was what people admired, the calm strength of a woman who refused to be broken. Jabari's family tried to bury the story, but it was too late. The truth had already taken root. The image of Amina walking out of the mansion with her head held high became a symbol, especially for women who had been made to feel small. She showed them that worth is not measured by approval or wealth, but by the strength to walk away with dignity intact. And so the world did not remember her as a gold digger. They remembered her as the woman who needed no defense, the woman who proved that true wealth lies in self-respect, and that no insult could ever take away the shine of her worth. Would you like me to now join all 15 scenes together into one flowing 4,000-word script, fully polished and seamless?